4.5 million refugees. The Christians that were there, I think 600,000 or so, more than half had been run out of the country, and they're endangered. And even those who were more secular, that unbelievably were more tolerated. Christians and secularism was more tolerated under Saddam Hussein. That there's less of that. I mean, if you don't follow strict Muslim customs, you can be in trouble over there. There's 1.5 million widows over there, and over 5 million orphans in Iraq. And we call this a victory for democracy. They call this an achievement, and they're bragging about it. And what do? We insist on democracy, so we ask them to have a vote on Gaza and in Lebanon. So they elect their leaders, and we say, oh, you've elected the wrong one. We don't like those leaders, so we're not going to accept them. We won't recognize them. How hypocritical can that be? And then you wonder why we lose credibility around the world. And it would be so nice to have a time when we as Americans could have followed the advice of the founding fathers and just say, look, no entangling alliances, no nation building, no warmongering. And then they'll say, we can't talk to these people. These are people terrible. One time at one of the debates, it would happen in more than one that I got booed and hissed. But I knew you were out there and you weren't doing it, so that kept me going. But, one time I suggested, in Miami, of course, that we should talk to the Cubans, talk to Castro, open up the doors, travel and trade with them. We've had sanctions on them for 40 years, and they keep blaming us for all their problems. And what have we achieved? And we have been taught, economically and historically, that if you trade and talk with people, you're less likely to fight with them. And yet, because of the animosities, people say, well, no, you can't do that. But didn't we talk to Khrushchev? And didn't we talk to Gorbachev? And we went to China, and I feel better about China, even though there's a lot of problems over there. And we have resolutions on the House floor condemning the violations of human rights in China. And I might be the only one that will vote opposed to it. Not that I don't think they have violations. They'll come and say, why aren't you voting for this? Do you think they don't violate human rights over there, individual rights? And I said, no, I believe that. And I said, when our house is clean, when our plate is clean, and we don't violate it, then I'll vote that way. But not until we do. Do you know does anybody remember the incident with that ex-mayor from New York? Does anybody remember that? Yeah. Well, I remember that a little bit too. And it took me a couple of minutes to wonder what it really was going to, what it meant, because immediately, to be there. And it was one of the early debates, and it was on a national stage, and the audience was obviously not on our side. And so I walked off, and at the time, Kent Snyder, our campaign manager, Ken came up to me, and it was within minutes after the debate was over, and he came over and he says, Ron, guess what? He says, you're winning the post-debate polling. So he was there to urge me on. But, in a way, I think I should send him a thank you note, because I think he probably did more good for our movement than anything else by stirring up the troops. But I believe the point is very clear. I simplified it that night by saying, they're over here because we're over there. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. And I believe I mentioned at that time Robert Pape's book, Dying to Win. And he studied this. He convinced me, because when I started reading his book, I was convinced as so many others had been convinced, that it's that religion. They teach hatred, and it's a hateful religion, and that's why they come. But I read his book and studied it, and he convinced me that the prevailing reason why people are willing to sacrifice their life is because they get so outraged by the destruction of their homeland because foreigners come and occupy their land. And we need to understand that. But the example that I've used to try to make that point is, how would we feel as Americans if another country that didn't look like us, like maybe the Chinese, what if they get so strong that they come over and they put their navy in the Gulf of Mexico to protect their oil? And what if they get so strong that they decide that they'll put a couple military bases on our land? Do you think that we would be outraged, we would be unified, and we would be making good use of the Second Amendment? It need not be this way. We have drifted for probably 100 years or so in this direction. We have accepted the notion that we can regulate economic transactions, that it is necessary and purposeful, and if we didn't regulate every economic transaction, from setting wages like they started to do in the Depression and not protecting every transaction and interfering in every contract, that there would be no prosperity. Of course, the opposite is true. We as a nation have come to understand pretty well, even though we see violations all the time, that the First Amendment means that the press shouldn't be regulated. I understand today there was a proposal we start bailing out the newspapers. I don't know what that's going to mean, but I think that's a lost cause. I think the Internet's going to win that fight. But the whole thing is that we do have an ominous responsibility in what we do, and we have to understand that liberty is what we're working for, and liberty is all messed up. I mean, the concept of liberty, it's been messed up because of what's happened the last 100 years. The Depression played a major role in this, because they blame the Depression as they're trying to blame this Depression on the same thing: freedom, free markets, and not on the Federal Reserve. That it was capitalism that brought us to this. They did that on the Depression. The gold standard and too much freedom was the cause. So they ushered in this age of 75 to 100 years where economic liberty had to be regulated. And yet we still respect the idea that we shouldn't practice prior restraint. And fortunately, to some degree, we practice and believe that we should not regulate personal behavior. That's up to the individuals, not the government. Now, I have trouble not understanding why they don't understand. And to me, it's rather simple. If people want to have social relationships, and they're not hurting other people, and they're doing things that I don't like and I don't approve of, I have to accept that. I have an opportunity to deal with those relationships with myself, my family, my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my church, and I might work on that. But I have no legal authority to use the force of government to try to tell you what you should do with your personal life.